Welcome, welcome, welcome to Health Issues. I'm your host, Chris Sylvain, and believe me, so excited about today and today's show. I am truly an advocate for social workers, and we have a social worker here today. Believe me, she is a premier social worker, well-trained, well-versed in the issues of helping people. Miss Cassandra Smith, how are you today?
Good, how are you? I'm glad to be here.
Well, hey, we're glad to have you. That's right. Really, first, you tell us, give us a little bit of your background. You started off, you're from New Orleans, am I correct?
Yes, yes. Well, some people would say the greater New Orleans area, the West Bank. But yes,
yeah,
New Orleans.
Not New Orleans.
So I always get that joke. But yes, I'm from the area, yes.
The area,
yes,
greater New Orleans
yes.
area, Gretna, Harvard,
Yes.
Marrero. Sounds good. But you ended up in Atlanta.
I did. I actually had, my brother was in the military and was stationed there for many, many years. So as a young child, I visited Atlanta back and forth, and I also had a close family member who attended Clark Atlanta. So when I visited, I fell in love with that HBCU and knew that that's where I wanted to go probably junior year in high school. So,
Really?
And have an excellent social work program. So that's another reason I went.
What high school?
Immaculata High School, which is now Academy of Our Lady. So they have blended Blank and Immaculata together. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
Marrero.
Yeah, I know the place well.
Yeah.
Okay, good, good. Excellent. Well, I mean, it gives it a good background. But then you went on to
Tulane, right. I came back, returned home. Of course, people say, you know, when you're from New Orleans, you always come back home. But my family was still here, of course, and so attended Tulane University for my master's in social work.
Fantastic. Good deal. Good deal. And now your agency is?
Yes, OPS Family Care. And we're located on the West Bank, but we do serve the greater New Orleans area.
And focus on? And
we focus on, we serve children and adults, and but we do a lot of work with children and families. Specifically children, we really specialize in children who've been traumatized and have experienced some form of trauma in their lives.
Okay, so explain, what is that? Let's see if we can define that. What type of kid, particularly a parent, you know, what type of kid would you be looking at?
Many times we get children who maybe have not yet even been have not identified, no one has identified that they've experienced a trauma, but they're presenting with behavioral problems in school, some behaviors at home that are causing difficulty for parents and siblings at home. They may have, whether it's been arrested or have experienced some sort of issue behaviorally, and then we end up getting those children to find that many times they have not had any treatment for not just one trauma, but complex trauma, several traumas that have occurred in their lives that have they've never processed, they've never healed from, and have kind of been overlooked and individuals in our community have acted as if they didn't happen.
Okay, give me some examples of those behaviors.
Some of those behaviors, you can see aggression, lashing out at other children as well as adults, many times defiance. A lot of what we see in children that people believe that they are hyper, and we have often given them labels like ADHD, which some children do authentically have, but many times children are misdiagnosed and they receive diagnosis of ADHD, but a lot of those symptoms are also attributed to trauma. So when children are anxious and have experienced a lot of trauma, they look like they're hyper. It's difficult for them to concentrate in school. They can't sit still. Many times they're oppositional or don't do what they're told to do, have difficulty with authority. All of those things that we typically see in children who have the greatest need, in some way usually can also be attributed to trauma.
Okay, you spent a lot of time as a school social worker.
Yes.
Okay, so what I hear you speaking about is a lot of the issues in all of the schools in the city of New Orleans, in
Yes.
Jefferson Parish. I mean,
Yes.
you know, inner city schools are dealing with many of these kids. They're the ones with under 16 on the ACT test.
Yes.
They're the ones who are suspended and a large portion of the school dropouts.
Right.
So that takes care of about 95% of them?
Yes, unfortunately. And I think that it's an issue that is under-addressed. I think it's overlooked and it's under-resourced. So we have many, many professionals who work with children, but many, many times the issue of trauma, which requires specialized training and it requires intensive time with the child, we often don't see they get that. So one thing is it requires resources and time, once again, and it requires training, which requires money. So many times the children who need the most specialized treatment don't get it because they don't necessarily have access to the resources that would allow them to get those services regularly.
Okay. I remember we did a show a couple of years ago that social work is the solution to the deep endemic problems in the city of New Orleans. Your thoughts about that whole concept?
I would agree, and I would even take it a step further to say we're moving to holistic health care, and so I think caring for children in the sense holistically, so dealing with their minds, their bodies, and all of those things are the solution because all of those things are connected.
Well, and so when we see a kid, underperforming in school and lashing out aggressive, the whole bit, literally the tale of the school systems that we have, I guess anywhere from 5 to 15 to 19 or whatever, the entire, well, 1st to 12th grade, all the way through. But the thinking that that's just the way life is.
I think that's unfortunate, and I think that even as adults in our community, we have become so numb and have changed what our beliefs are about what the norm is and should be. And I think it's attributed to because part of it is coping, and it's almost natural for us to kind of try to ignore or become numb to things that we feel like we can't control. And I think a lot of our community has done that, which is, I think we see a lot of the results in the social ills we see because of that numbness. And when children experience certain things that are beyond their control, whether it's seeing someone being shot in their neighborhoods, whether it's seeing mother and father or boyfriend and mom or sister and brother fighting violently, those are things beyond a child's control. So what happens is they begin to grow a numbness, and they try to get control in any way that they can. And so I think we see a lot of that in behaviors and a lot of our crime rate and a lot of the things that we're fighting with, and we're not dealing with some of the foundation of where those problems start.
We have two cities. We have one New Orleans and then we have another New Orleans. And
yes.
In both New Orleans, everybody feels it's quite normal in their environment, but the level of violence, the level of the whipping, the literally child abuse, where the kids experience a harshness from almost birth, and the physical fighting and violence that finds itself on Instagram and Facebook, where it becomes a normalized way that people live. Right.
And I think one of the biggest things we have to do is anybody that works with children, you have an opportunity to kind of chisel through that numbness and that ice. And I think oftentimes people don't utilize the opportunities that they have, whether it's someone who is, a custodian, someone who is a hairdresser, someone who is a pediatrician. Unfortunately, a lot of children don't receive the kind of love and nurturing that they need at an early age. And so anytime we have an opportunity to get past that coldness and that numbness and offer them praise and offer them nurturing, I think we should do that. And I think we take that for granted because, as you said, I think many, many times, many of our children, all they get is degrading and harshness and rejection and belittling. So whenever we have an opportunity to be that nurturer for a child, we should, in any capacity.
You just brought the responsibility to everybody.
Yes, and so I'm very big on that because I know, as a social worker, I love what I do, but I know I can't do what I do in isolation. So I have to be able to incorporate, whether you are in politics or healthcare or whatever arena, we have to be able to work together because there's no success in just trying to work in each discipline or in each capacity on our own.
Well, part of that issue of this, the way things are, if I can grab a little bit of that again, at what point is it the child's own responsibility to change their behavior when they're coming up in those environments?
I think it's virtually, and I think that's why we make a distinction between children and adults. I think research has shown that not until really now, your early 20s, is your frontal lobe really developed well into the 20s. So to say that a child has the responsibility, certainly we want to teach them to be empowered and know that they can control their choices and even command their destiny. We want to teach our children that and empower them, but we also don't want to take away our accountability. We are there to raise children. Children are not there to raise themselves. And if my mother used to always say, they didn't ask to come here. So that's one of the ways I've always viewed children and interacting with children, is that we're the adults. And that's one of the things I teach kids who've been abused or who've been traumatized, because oftentimes there's role reversal. So they've had to parent themselves. They've had to take care of themselves. They've had to take care of brothers and sisters. So giving them an opportunity to know this is not what you're supposed to do, that now there are safe people, hopefully, that are there to take care of you and to allow you to be a child.
But if they don't meet you and they just experience the harshness until about 18, 19 years old, they virtually, is there any idea at all that they could, particularly having been traumatized, that they can reverse themselves out of this on their own, or some TV show they'll watch somewhere? Or?
I believe that there's always hope and change for people. Is if you have a will to change and you have in some way someone to intervene or to advocate or to give you an opportunity, because I think that's where a lot of our youth fall through the cracks, because they even give them a term now called opportunity youth, so 18 years old to 24, and I think those are the kids that you're talking about, that they're legally adults, but what has happened along the way that possibly they've not been able to reach their fullest potential. So not only do they have to have the will, but now we have to make sure that they have opportunity.
But with no opportunity?
With no opportunity, unfortunately, I think that's why we see some of the violence that we see, and some of the harm to others as well as harm to themselves, because essentially that's what they're doing, whether it's via drugs and slowly harming themselves, or via suicide or criminal behaviors. That's when you see that, when there's no opportunity.
Yeah, because the human, the mind, the emotions, humans aren't built to break out of those demeaning, debasing structures. Right. At those ages.
No, they don't. You're not built with that equipment. You need assistance, you need guidance, you need nurturing, you need direction. And so when you don't get that, on top of lack of opportunity, lack of resources, it's a recipe for disaster.
Got it. And we'll let people figure out that after 24 later, because usually by that time the system has demeaned them and debased them so much, whereas you don't have a whole lot left.
Exactly. And the resources that we are utilizing, unfortunately, to build jails, we can utilize those resources to add services for children who are really in need, to kind of add to our foster care systems and hospitals. But unfortunately, that's an issue that we all have to be vocal about in many, many ways, one of which is voting. One of which is voting.
Well, hopefully we're not voting for Homer the Clown.
Hopefully not.
We'll deal with that later. Get you in trouble.
Right.
All right, let's go back to what you do. Now, so you're able to kind of wave a little magic wand when they come in your office and pop.
Absolutely
it just
not.
all of a sudden they become everything you want them to be.
Absolutely not. One of the things we always say is we start where the child or the parent or the client is. So whether you are there because you want to be there and you want to be in counseling and you want to get help, or you're court mandated, you have to buy into why you're there, and you have to have a will to do something that maybe is not comfortable. So we have to start where you are, and we have to first address what are your reservations about being there. And unfortunately, sometimes that takes a lot longer than people would like. It takes longer than sometimes teachers would like. It takes longer than managed care would like. It takes longer than, agencies and sometimes parents. But we have to really allow our clients to be the catalyst for their own change. We give them the tools, but we allow them to kind of direct their own change. And sometimes it's not a magic wand, and I wish it was.
But okay, if I can grab this in, you do a lot of holistic stuff, and I'll see if we can grab a hold of this question. Theologically, there's a belief, I actually believe, that of deliverance, that a child through prayer can be delivered and they'll change. But they still need a nurturing environment.
Correct.
To not revert back.
I agree, and I think I'm a Christian, and so my belief system is that we all, when we become Christians, we are recreated. We're the way that God wants us to be. However, our minds are oftentimes not. Exactly. Our bodies are oftentimes not. So we have a recreated spirit that's wonderfully made via Christ Jesus, but we still have to do some work in our flesh and in our minds. And I think it's kind of what you're saying is that children oftentimes, I'm a firm believer in prayer, but like the word says, faith without works is dead. So once you're there and you have prayed for that child, it's now up to us to start to do some of those things to help that child grow into what God really wants them to be.
Just to throw it out, if we find the child on the ground beat and bleeding, unless we're going to pick that child up and bring them to the end, and put some ointment and some money on that,
right?
We're fooling ourselves.
Right. You wouldn't just leave them bleeding, pray over them and leave them bleeding. You would pick them up. Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that we also are working on. Myself and another organization is trying to engage ministers and pastors in mental health training. And that's kind of, you led me right to that. So that's coming up in the very near future, and we're contacting a variety of church clusters to do that, to come out with a mental health certificate and training in certain social services, and helping them to build that in their congregations and in their ministries, because research shows that for African Americans, they start with their pastors. They may not ever come to me. That's right. They go to their pastors first. If they do come to a therapist, wonderful, but then they even go back after to their pastors. So it's important that we engage churches in that, and we can't pretend like things aren't going on right in front of our faces, right?
Yeah, many times, and you hit the nail on the head, because if the church doesn't understand the role of, I call it, who's going to bandage the child. Right. The church can pray, but that they need the social worker to do some of that bandaging at the end. And particularly when you're dealing with traumatized, suicidal, homicidal, those things, it's time to kind of switch off and bring that to another professional. I call it Luke the physician, as opposed to.
And I think we should stop. I think many churches have well-qualified professionals in their congregations, and I think sometimes you forget the resources that are right under your nose. Exactly. And many times I think also these are difficult topics for people in general to deal with. So there's a natural human level of avoidance, when you talk about certain things and issues. But I think ultimately, like you're saying, it's the church's responsibility. That's why we're here.
I'm going to bring a point out. My daughter mentioned it the other day, and she's 16, but and we work in a pharmacy. So we had never seen so many people that can curse and pray at the same time. Well, the concept though is that in church we use spare the rod, spoil the child. There, much of this trauma, could it come from We spare the rod, spoil the child. So therefore, I'm going to use the rod in the name of Jesus. I'm going to whip you and I'm going to get you right.
Are you trying to get me in trouble, Mr. Sylvain?
Yes,
I'm very passionate about that. Well, first of all, I think I always tell people, you know, when we were younger, we used to put butter on burns because that's what we thought and what we're taught was what fixed the burn. Mm-hmm. We don't do that anymore because we now understand that that makes the burn worse. And even though that's something that we had been doing for a long time and that had been taught to us to do for a long time to heal a burn, we don't do it anymore. And I think the same type of thinking has to now be applied to corporal punishment in physical spankings or whoopings, essentially. I think that is one of those ways of doing things that not necessarily have been beneficial to us. And I think, unfortunately, we associate that with discipline in the only way that we can discipline our children. But our children are very intelligent, they're intuitive, and for some reason I think that we don't understand that we were whipped and beaten as slaves. And that was done to break our spirits, to stop our independent thinking, and to change our vision for ourselves and how we view ourselves. So if you think about that's why it was done then, for me, that's enough for me not to ever want to hit a child. And I think that the same purpose it served then is the same result that you can get now.
Yeah, you're in deep trouble.
I know.
you know that.
Yeah,
in our community, I'm sure. It what it is.
I'm sure. And I've had this heated discussion. And quite honestly, you know, as I progressed and I grew as a person and as a woman, I used to vacillate. I used to think, oh, yeah, they just need a spanking, you know. And then as I grew and started to learn and started to observe, and then in wisdom and I just really, and in my relationship with God, I just truly believe it's not necessary. I think this is what I think. I think spanking is quicker. You can do it as a reactionary. I'm reacting and I'm angry. But ultimately, it takes a lot more work to spend quality time to talk to your child, to model the behavior that you want them to do and emulate. If you are aggressive or you are violent or you lie or you do some of those things that you are telling your child not to do, children will do as you do, not as you say. So I think that we use spankings as a way to kind of create a shortcut that really isn't a shortcut.
African-American males, young boys, if we don't spank them, they'll turn into a sissy.
That's absolutely ridiculous. It just, in my opinion, it's ridiculous. I think that, in fact, you're taking away their manhood. That's what I believe. I believe that's why many times we see some young African American men afraid to take steps to follow their dreams, afraid to follow finish education, and to step out there and do things that they've always wanted to do. Because all corporal punishment does is instill fear. That's what you're doing. Your child is not listening to you or obeying you because they respect you or they understand your directions and the love and guidance. They are following you in some cases, because sometimes they don't. You spank them and they still do what they want to do. But if they are following you, it's out of fear. So then when they become adults, there's an intrinsic fear that's on the inside of them that they don't even understand why it's there. So that's just what I believe. So I think it's ridiculous.
Back you up
Studies
all the way.
do. And it's only, I mean, it's been done in every capacity you could think of. And we can't keep putting butter on a burn. We can't keep pretending like this is the way that we need to do things.
Okay. Well, all right. Let's switch. I'm gonna get you off of that.
Get me off of that.
Beat you up when you walk out of here.
My mom's gonna be calling me.
What is wrong with you, girl? It's good. Okay, but all right. I want to deal with the males first, and then we deal with the females. Or is it all the same? And they've been traumatized. They've been beat coming up, and you know, they're violent. They're violent in behavior, whether it be cursing or not cursing, and they're acting out. How do you, like you say, chisel through that cement?
That's a difficult question, and I think if I had the answer, I probably wouldn't be here. I probably would have evolved to that point. The first thing is making sure that children have an outlet, and also that we are working with the adults. And we keep talking about working with children, but one of the wonderful programs that talks about child abuse and prevention of child abuse is Darkness to Light, and they offer it at the Children's Advocacy Center. And so one of the things that I remember them saying all the time was, you know, we need to stop putting the responsibility of children protecting themselves on them. That it's our responsibility as adults. So now I think, to answer your question, and I've always focused a lot of my work on children, but that has people think that means you don't work. I have to work with the family. I have to work with the parent. So for me, I think it's time that we just started having these type of dialogues with parents and adults and community people, and really now working to educate adults about what is in the best interest of children.
And how do you approach them?
I think you just have to open up the conversation and know that whatever you're doing and whatever you're saying, it's always to see the best from their child or for their lives. And I think that's the way that you have to approach everybody, because if you don't approach people in love and they don't feel that, because we communicate with a lot of different mechanisms, not just our words, so they have to know that you really genuinely have an interest in seeing the best in their lives and the best in their children's lives.
We have about a minute left. Talk to us about what do families need to focus on? As you know, it's a big thing. We eat an elephant one bite at a time. What are some of the things that families right now, hey, a mother at home with her kids and they're acting out, what are some of the things that that parent needs to drill on right away?
I would say certainly try to do as much as you can positive interaction with your child. Try to spend as much time as you have, and I know all of us are moving day to day. Spend as much time as you have with your child. Set up as much structure as you can in your household, because that makes it not only easier on you, but your child wants that kind of structure. And do whatever you can in your power to protect your child and put them first in your life. And I think that's where you can start.
I'm overwhelmed and I'm excited. Miss Cassandra Smith, we thank you for all of the parents and all of us. Hey, it's our responsibility. We have to take it seriously and not ever take it lightly. On so many different areas. Please share this video, you know, YouTube it or whatever you have to do to get it around and get it out. But we have to protect, if I didn't hear anything else, protect these children. This idea of the violence against the children, calling it whipping or whatever, hey, I agree with her. Put your hand on her and I'm going to take you out. The thing of it is that, no, we have to recognize that there's a new way of living, and it's really the old way. It's called love. Thank you so much.